Hey there, internet friends. Trevor Starkey here from TrevorTrove.com, and this is the first episode of Wrestling Wednesdays. Admittedly, I didn't quite know the format I'm looking to work with on this show, so I'm just going to kind of wing it for right now, and hopefully in the coming weeks this will get more streamlined into a normal kind of structure. I want to kick things off with a little bit of background on my wrestling history. I grew up in the Attitude Era and was a big fan of wrestling back in elementary school, middle school, maybe early high school, late 90s, early 2000s. I remember definitely going to a Raw at America West Arena. That's what it was at the time. I don't even know what it's called these days. And I feel like it was right after a WrestleMania or some big pay-per-view, but I couldn't tell you which one it was. I think the Rock and Sock Connection was a thing at the time. I feel like I remember them being a part of the show. I started tuning out in the early 2000s, apart from playing the games occasionally. Even when I was out in the wilderness not watching wrestling, I was still kind of keeping an ear to the ground in terms of some of the names and stuff. So I knew when Lesnar was coming in and becoming a big thing. I knew CM Punk as a name. And I would occasionally check in with stuff like Matt Fowler's recaps over on IGN. Even though I wasn't following along, I would enjoy his write-ups on the stuff. And then about 6 months ago, I saw in my Twitter feed a tweet to the effect of, John Carl has liked such and such a video from What Culture Wrestling, and I was like, whatever the headline, whatever the top 10 list of it was, caught my eye, and I was like, oh, I'm curious. So I clicked on it, and then just 2 hours went by and I had watched 10 or 15 or however many top 10 videos from What Culture. And so that kind of got me, started kind of pulling me back into it and dragging me down the rabbit hole. And so here I am. For this first episode, I just kind of want to run through maybe a couple of highlights from Raw and then SmackDown Live and maybe give some thoughts on what's to come in Backlash. So on Raw, one of the first highlights I want to touch on, Jeff Hardy versus Sheamus. The Hardy Boys were a thing when I watched beforehand, and through watching What Culture stuff, I'd been hearing about Broken Matt and Broken Jeff and all that stuff, and their kind of away from WWE personas kind of building up. And then I was not watching WrestleMania this year, but I was watching the Kind of Funny live stream of WrestleMania. And when the Hardys came back, it was a big old bump, and I was like, yay, good for them. They were awesome. I definitely remember doing swanton bombs or pretending to do swanton bombs off of my loft bed back when I would pretend to be a wrestler, and it was mostly more elbow drops and stuff, but they were always somebody I emulated when I played pretend of wrestling. So it's great to have the Hardys back. And Sheamus, somehow a person in the world who is whiter than me, so that's crazy. That's just bleh. Up next, I want to touch on the Alexa Bliss and Bayley feud. Thought it was kind of a dick move to have Bayley lose at Payback in her hometown of San Jose, and then having also just recently watched that pay-per-view, kind of in preparation for this video series and whatnot. It definitely kind of killed the momentum on that, but I love the feud that they're doing, and I think both of the characters are fun, charismatic. One of the things I loved specifically about the moment in Raw with Alexa and Bayley was the kendo stick under the ring, because I immediately flashed back to someone like Steve Blackman and just him whipping people up and down the arenas back in the day. Back in my day, he was just the lethal weapon, Steve Blackman. He was the one who always had the kendo stick, you see? Oh my goodness. He would just whoop-ha people, and it was painful to watch. So that's what I thought of. Weird old voice and all. Yeah. Then lastly, just as the final tie back to my old life, Dean Ambrose versus The Miz. I watched The Miz when he was on Real World, when that show was airing. And watching him want to be a WWF superstar, knowing that he'd gotten into it shortly thereafter and has grown in his career to this point, it's still weird. It's a weird thing for me. Yeah. Raw's weird. As an aside, when did people get okay with the champion not showing up on a regular basis? It bothers me, and it's annoying as all hell that Lesnar hasn't done anything since WrestleMania and won't do anything until, what, friggin' Great Balls of Fire or whatever? Oh my god, just, no! If you're gonna put the belt on a guy, make it a guy who's there. Urgh. Moving on to Smackdown Live, Orton versus Baron Corbin. This was as predictable as anything else, that Jinder Mahal and his little goons, the Singh Boys, would interfere and cost Orton the match. It's weird that they started Jinder's push out of nowhere, of course, but then they started it with calling his little guys the Bollywood Boys, and then they were like, you know, maybe that's a little racist for this already really racist thing we're gonna do. So let's just make them the Singh Boys. Let's just give them a last name, and it's not Bollywood. They're not, you know, gonna be doing funny dances and stuff. It's just they're gonna be gruesome and heels, and so because Bollywood's so funny. The commentators just started calling them the Singh Boys after weeks of calling them the Bollywood Boys, and I'm like, what? No. It's bad writing is what that is. Also on SmackDown Live, you had Jinder Mahal going up against AJ Styles this week. Good match. I enjoyed the athleticism there of AJ versus like the brute, the roid raginess of Jinder. Giving Jinder the win makes me think that they're going to keep the belt on Orton. Once again, the artists formerly known as the Bollywood Boys interfered, and it makes me wonder, and I haven't gone through and looked closely enough or anything, but has Jinder done anything in this push that did not involve those two helping him out? Has he done anything on his own, or is he entirely mooching off of the support of his little goon squad? TJP versus Austin Aries was another good bout. I've been enjoying the build that they've kind of been giving that, and throwing Neville and Gentleman Jack Gallagher, Gentleman Jack, handlebar mustache guy. Been appreciating kind of the story they've been telling over there the last few weeks. So to close out this first week, I want to touch on a few matches coming up at Backlash this weekend and kind of give my predictions. Up first, I want to touch on Shinsegae Nakamura versus Dolph Ziggler. They've really been hyping up Shinsuke's like in-ring debut, in SmackDown debut. They're not going to build it up this much and hype him up this much and kind of put him on the promotional materials for Backlash and not have him win. So I think he's going to go over on Dolph. Then you've got AJ Styles versus Kevin Owens for United States Champion. I think for the sheer fact that they just flipped the title and had it go from Owens to Jericho and then right back to Owens, I think Owens is going to keep it a little while and keep his new Face of America gimmick going. So I think he'll take it over Styles. And then Orton versus Jinder, I think, going off of what I was talking about earlier, I think Jinder has been too reliant on help from his goon squad, and I think we've seen him get the victory over Orton too much in this build-up, so I think Orton will retain his title. Anyway, that's the first episode of Trevor Trove's Wednesday Wrestling Show. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with it moving forward, but let me know what you think of this week in wrestling, as well as what your predictions for Backlash are in the comments below. As always, like, share, subscribe, all that fun jazz. You can follow me at Snarky Starkey on Twitter, and until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends. And lastly, and I guess this falls into 205 Live, whatever that is, and I really don't know because I'm kind of a noob, so oops. 205 Live being like the cruiserweight stuff, and I don't know what it is in that I don't know why it's like a match on Raw and then this thing after SmackDown on SmackDown, and why everything's purple instead of whatever show they're on. Whatever.